What's up, Mad Worlds? Coach Sess. Let's jump right into this one. It's a breakdown of Ethan Blevins versus Ramiro Gutierrez. Fight for it 20 May 11th, this Saturday in the 145 division MMA. This is that fight that I told everybody is going to be one of those show stealers, a barn burner. I got a little bit of a request from, I believe, someone out of Blevins' camp, has the same last name. I'm going to assume Big Brother or Papa. He doesn't look too old. But here's the bottom line. If we look at this fight, you have to look at it in categories. It's not as simple as saying, hey, this guy's going to win. You have to look at the categories, who's going to dominate. I want to look at, because of how these guys perform, I want to look at this fight going to the distance. But it's the things that are naturally attributed to both men, that's going to make a difference. For instance, Blevins is almost like an Aaron Pico. He's been doing this nearly all his life in some form or another in combat sports. So it's almost like, yeah, he's geared for this. In only his second MMA fight, he is already a champion of Ultimate Battleground, a show that is ran by the one and only Derek Brunson. And the first time I'm seeing video of this guy, guess who's in the corner? Derek Brunson, Don Terry Woods. All right, so he's got like star-studded people from around the area that's working with him. And I see in videos of him going to UFC events, whether they be expos or actual fights. This is a guy who's taking his career seriously. So you have to put this in on his side of the ledger and say, okay, this is an advantage. This is something that gives him a little bit of a favor. If I'm looking at this, Ramiro Gutierrez, he's got Shelton Sales, a former Fight Lab champion, a professional who's got some experience behind him, a professional who laid off this game for about 3.5 years and recently made his comeback and put up a good showing. You know what I'm talking about? That's not easy to do. A professional who is a black belt and a guy who continuously keeps his skills at a high level. And when you do the background tracing of a Shelton Sales, the one thing you notice is everybody always says, oh, I'm a champion, I'm this and that. Shelton has the background to show it in terms of who he fought. The guys that he fought were champions. All right, he comes from a high level pedigree. And Gutierrez, to me, just watching him, it took me a minute to see it because I was just looking at the finishes. And I'm going, Gutierrez is Shelton Sales 2.0. That's what I saw. And I was like, oh, yeah, 145 division? That's where Shelton fought. I'm like, this guy is Shelton Sales 2.0. He's got the wrestling. He's got the striking. And the thing about when I say attributes, I mean who has it in abundance. So number one, power, Gutierrez. This guy has power in both hands. He hits you with the right, you fall. He hits you with the left, you fall. This guy has power in his both hands. And when it comes to speed, Blevins is so subtle, but it's something I've been working with a particular athlete on for the last 6 months. It's what we call the first step. Blevins covers the distance very, very quickly, has a beautiful first step. I love athletes with first step. The first time I saw a beautiful first step was with a fighter named Ricky Saxton, an amateur undefeated pro, multi-time champion. Ricky could close the distance. A lot of times it was with his shot, but as he migrated over into MMA, it was also in his striking. Blevins has that same pedigree. And you can see it in his wrestling. He has that first step that is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. So when it comes to speed, I got Blevins. When it comes to power, I got Gutierrez. The anomaly, the X factor is going to be endurance. Why? We haven't seen Ramiro go that long yet. We've seen him have these one-round fights, and he's finished his opponents each time. So it's an X factor. We don't know what he's going to look like in round 2. We don't know what he's going to look like in round 3. Can he handle it? Will his lungs start burning? Will his chest start rising and falling and let doubt and anxiety creep in? That's going to give Blevins the advantage. See, Blevins is already a champion himself in mixed martial arts. And he's gone the distance. He's done 5 rounds. He knows what it feels like when the heat is on. He knows what it feels like when the lungs are burning and the smoke are coming through your nose. Blevins knows. And that's his advantage. So I got to say, endurance-wise, Blevins is going to have the advantage there. But the trick is, how can he push Gutierrez into that deep water? How does he push him there? His wrestling. Both men have wrestling pedigree. You can tell from the way Gutierrez carries his stance. He has a wrestling pedigree. The difference is Blevins is a little bit more well-defined and more refined in his wrestling, and he tends to stand a little bit more upright like a striker. Gutierrez gives himself away a little bit. You can see it. Now, this is what I know about Gutierrez. That's how you know he has power, because sometimes he's not even on his feet in the correct position and he still has this power. So that's what Blevins got to watch out for, is using that timing to go in, and Gutierrez is standing right there waiting for him to come to land one of those counter shots. But I believe Blevins is going to be patient, add some feints to the game. Neither men kick often. I'm not going to say they kick poorly or they kick well. You just don't see enough kicking from them. If I'm Blevins, I want to sap some of that power from Gutierrez by kicking that outside leg that will also let him maintain his southpaw stance. That's right, he's a southpaw. That'll help him stay away from a little bit of that power. I haven't seen Gutierrez give 2 cents about what stance you're in. He looks to be a guy that's going to come forward and get busy early. And if Blevins can survive it, then it's going to be a long night for Gutierrez, because that power, you don't get stronger in a fight, you get weaker. So that power is going to dissipate just a little bit. Now, Blevins has his own pop. In that southpaw stance, he's got a decent left hand that I've seen land, and I've seen him drop a guy. And he's really consistent with it. The only thing he needs to watch out for is head hunting too much. But I like what he does. He head hunts, and then when they react to it, he changes level. Boom. The guy has got a pedigree behind him. One of the things I've heard is that Blevins also has the opportunity to spend time with Salty Dog, John Salter, and Joe Selecki, the UFC fighter. If the rumors are true, this guy has the pedigree behind him. He does, and that's going to give him a little bit of an advantage there. You know, just being able to have that lineage. You get that confidence that comes from that. He's got the experience from more wrestling rounds. He's got the experience from more MMA rounds. So he's got some things that have been tested. When I look at their opponents, you know, like who have they fought? Blevins wins out there as well, and having fought Jacob Paez for the title. Jacob Paez was able to threaten him with submissions that Blevins escaped. Jacob Paez was able to threaten him with strikes that Blevins answered accordingly. And Jacob Paez was able to really regain his guard a lot, defend, gave Blevins a fit in certain areas. We don't know that much about Gutierrez because we haven't seen anybody take it to him. We don't know if he's going to be able to maintain his composure when Blevins is fighting him back. That's the X factor. So what does Gutierrez do to win? Remember who you train with, Shelton Sales. Remember who you train with. All right. And do what you've been doing. You've got power in both hands. What would destroy Gutierrez's game? If he decides all of a sudden, well, I don't want to use both hands. I want to be this stylistic fighter. Yeah, work on your new composure. Love it. Work on your new fight IQ. Love it. Work on your new conditioning, your new attitude, but make sure you don't pull so far back that you forget to work. Because that's what happens sometimes when fighters change things. Because someone says this style that you have now is better. Well, not necessarily. What you want is to correct your form, correct your balance, improve your timing, but still maintain your same style. You still have that fighter's attitude. And Blevins has to lean way into his pedigree. Kid, you were born to do this. Guys, we're looking at fighters now that are born into this era, and they're white belts and blue belts who are now having the skills of guys who were born into the game, but they didn't get the recognition. They didn't get that ability to pull the trigger until they were purple belt, brown belts, and sometimes even black belts. We're looking at guys who fight like brown belts and black belts, and they're white belts and purple belts at best. Yep. And that's just using the jiu-jitsu, what I want to call it, lineage. Using that parody of jiu-jitsu just to kind of give it some type of measurement. Now, they're not quite at the level of a Muay Thai fighter. They're not quite at the level of a amateur boxing golden gloves, but I don't expect that considering that both men have wrestling pedigrees. But I would definitely put them at blues and purples easily with their control, with their patience, their ability to see openings. And like I said, they're adding the other attributes from the boxing and the kickboxing. They haven't perfected the technique yet, and that's what's so scary. I've always said this thing about wrestlers when they get into striking. They remind me, power-wise, attribute-wise, not technique-wise, but attribute-wise, they remind me of a Dan Henderson. You don't have quite everything right, but you don't want to run in there with your hands down and your chin up. All right. Wrestlers have always done a great job of developing good power punching, good striking as a whole, but definitely good power punching. It comes from all those years in the wrestling room and developing that physical capability and getting used to the workouts where you go 100% live. So then it's easy to transition over when you're working strikes. They just have to work on a little bit more technique. I don't think we're there yet, but it's pretty close. It's pretty close. This fight's going to be a great fight. This is my show stealer. Look down in the comments. I've shared some links of their fights. I didn't want to do a remix video because I would have to remix some Fight for It and some Ultimate Battleground, and I didn't want to deal with the argument of who owns what. Although I know I could probably get away with it for a little while, but I know that two competing companies are not going to allow it to stay for very long. So look down, check out their videos, and make your own mind up about who wins this fight, who has the advantage. I've told you who has the overall advantage. That's Blevins. But the guy with the two guns, inside of that cage, that's Gutierrez. And I've also laid down how I think both men can win the fight. It just comes down to Blevins being more technically skilled, focusing on that for 3 rounds, and Gutierrez, hey, empty the chambers. That's all you got to know. I am Coach Sess, and you've had words with the Mad Coach.